Rejected Omega fed a pup daily. One night 4 black wolves came, and the Alpha King watched. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to Elena Hart. Elena Hart learned early how to be quiet in a place that rewarded noise, how to step aside when stronger voices filled the air, how to lower her eyes and make herself smaller without disappearing completely, because disappearing meant danger in a pack that measured worth by presence and power. She lived at the edge of the settlement where the trees pressed close and the wind carried the clean scent of pine instead of judgment, a one-room cabin patched with care and patience, a place no one else wanted. They called her Rejected Omega not because she argued or failed her duties, but because rejection became the easiest word to use when no one wanted to look deeper. Each morning she rose before the sun, counted her steps across the cold ground in worn boots, and gathered what she could, scraps of food saved from the night before, crusts, bits of dried meat, always careful, always mindful, because resources were watched and kindness was rarely forgiven. It was on one of those mornings, with frost still silvering the grass and the forest holding its breath, that she noticed the pup again, tucked near a fallen log where shadows pooled like water. Small, dark-furred, eyes too bright for a body that thin, it did not whine or beg, only watched her with a patience that felt older than it should have been. The pack had passed it by days ago, dismissing it with shrugs and murmurs about nature deciding its own outcomes. But Elena paused, as she always did, because stopping had become her quiet rebellion. She placed the food down, stepped back, and waited, heart steady, breath slow, letting the pup decide. It ate carefully, then looked at her as if memorizing her shape, and Elena felt something loosen inside her chest, a knot she hadn't realized she carried. Day after day she returned, measuring time by the light through branches, the change in the air, the way the pup grew stronger without ever crossing an invisible line. She seemed to understand. She named it Ash because it lingered in the gray spaces, neither claimed nor gone, and because Ash could hide embers if given the chance. At night, as Elena lay listening to the forest, she sometimes felt watched, not in fear, but in awareness, as if the woods themselves had learned her name. Footprints appeared and vanished, deeper than any she recognized, and the wind carried a scent that was steady and controlled, not wild, not careless. Elena did not know that far beyond the reach of firelight, for black wolves moved with purpose, nor that a man stood still among the trees, observing without judgment, learning the measure of a heart through the simplest of choices. Morning came softly to the edge of the pack, the kind of morning that felt borrowed, thin sunlight slipping through branches and resting on the ground, as if unsure it was welcome. Elena Hart moved through it with practiced care, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth, her steps measured in quiet inches. She did not look toward the center of the settlement where voices were already rising, laughter sharp and careless, because she had learned that attention was a currency she could not afford. Instead, she followed the narrow path she had worn herself, boots brushing against pine needles, breath steady, heart calm in a way it never was anywhere else. Ash was waiting near the fallen log, sitting instead of crouching now, posture a little stronger, ears alert, tail still. The pup did not rush her. It never did. It watched as she knelt, unfolded the cloth, and set the food down with the same care. She gave everything, as if each motion mattered. Elena sat back on her heels and waited, hands resting on her knees, eyes lowered, giving space because trust grew better when it was not chased. Ash ate, then paused, lifted its head, and stepped closer than before, close enough that Elena could feel warmth radiating through the cool air. She did not reach out. She simply breathed and let the moment settle. Over the following days the rhythm held, quiet and consistent, a small ritual carved out of nothing. Elena brought food measured in handfuls and ounces, counted carefully so she would not be questioned, and Ash met her with a calm that felt deliberate, almost thoughtful. The pup grew, not fast, but steadily, fur thickening, movements smoothing out, eyes always tracking her, as if she were a fixed point in a shifting world. Sometimes Elena spoke softly, not full sentences, just fragments, the kind people used when they talked to themselves, telling Ash about the weather, about the way the wind changed before rain, about nothing important at all. She did not notice when the forest began to listen. The air felt heavier in the evenings, sounds carrying farther than they should have, leaves rustling even when there was no wind. Once, as she walked back toward her cabin at dusk, she stopped because the silence behind her felt shaped, intentional, like a held breath. She turned slowly, expecting nothing, and saw only trees and shadow, yet the feeling remained, calm but alert, as if something watched without intrusion. Elena did not know that farther back, where the light thinned and the ground bore deeper marks, for black wolves had begun to pass through the same paths she walked, their movements precise, their presence changing the forest without disturbing it. She did not know that higher ground now bore the imprint of a man who stood still for long stretches of time, observing, listening, learning the cadence of her days. At the pack, whispers followed her more closely. Someone noticed the food she did not finish. Someone else mentioned seeing her near the woods more often. A suggestion was made, half joking, half sharp, about wasted effort and misplaced kindness. Elena heard it and said nothing, because defending herself had never changed an outcome. That night, she returned to Ash later than usual, the sky deepening into indigo, stars beginning to show. The pup was there, waiting, body relaxed, eyes bright, and for the first time it leaned into her space without hesitation, brushing against her leg before settling. Elena smiled, small and surprised, and rested her hand on her own knee, resisting the urge to reach out, because some lines mattered even when no one else could see them. As she left, the forest shifted again, and from the distance came the quiet alignment of four shadows moving together, while unseen, a steady gaze followed Elena Hart. Back toward the edge of her world, measuring not her strength, but her consistency, not her rank, but her choice to return every single day. By the end of the week the routine had become as natural to Elena Hart as breathing, and that alone made her uneasy because nothing in her life had ever been allowed to stay gentle for long. She woke before dawn, measured out the food with careful fingers, and followed the path that no one else claimed, her steps falling into a rhythm that matched the forest. Ash was always there now, not hidden, not crouched, sitting in the open with a patience that felt intentional, as if waiting was a skill being practiced. The pup was larger, not by much, but enough that Elena noticed the difference when it rose to greet her, shoulders squaring, stance steadier, eyes sharp and attentive. She set the food down and stayed back, as she always did, watching the small chest rise and fall, listening to the sounds around them, the distant call of birds, the subtle shift of branches overhead. Sometimes she imagined she could hear more than before, a deeper layer beneath the usual forest noise, like a quiet hum that had not existed until recently. Elena told herself it was nothing, just her mind filling the silence. Still, she found herself glancing around more often, noting how the shadows seemed longer even when the sun was high, how the air felt charged, not threatening, just aware. Ash finished eating and lingered, pacing a small circle before sitting again, closer this time, close enough that Elena could see the individual strands of dark for catching the light. She spoke softly, telling the pup about the day ahead, about the chores she would complete, about the way the pack would gather without her, her voice low and steady, not because Ash understood the words, but because the sound mattered. The pup tilted its head, ears flicking, gaze never leaving her face. At the edge of her vision, something moved, slow and controlled, then stilled. Elena froze, breath caught, heart steady despite the awareness that she was no longer alone in the way she had been before. She did not turn. She did not run. She waited, trusting the same instinct that had brought her back here day after day. The presence remained, distant, restrained, as if observing. A boundary it had no intention of crossing. When she finally stood to leave, Ash followed a few steps, stopping when she stopped, respecting the invisible line she had never drawn but always kept. Elena smiled, a small curve of lips she did not realize she had allowed herself, and nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement of the understanding between them. Back at the settlement, the atmosphere had shifted. Eyes followed her longer. A comment was made about her being absent more often, about her time being wasted on the woods. Someone laughed, not kindly, and suggested she was feeding strays again, as if generosity were a flaw that could be named and dismissed. Elena did not respond. She finished her tasks, carried water measured in gallons she had counted so many times they felt etched into her hands, and returned to her cabin as the light faded. That night the forest did not sleep easily. The wind moved with purpose, leaves whispering in patterns that felt deliberate, and far beyond her small home, for dark shapes aligned themselves along a ridge, watching the place where she would walk at dawn. From a higher vantage point, a man stood still, his presence calm and absolute, eyes focused not on the land he ruled, but on the Omega who returned to a single spot each day without expectation or reward. He noted the way she never took more than she needed, the way she gave without looking for acknowledgement, the way the pup responded not to command but to consistency. Somewhere between dusk and night, a decision settled into place, quiet and firm, while Elena's heart lay awake listening to the forest breathe, unaware that her simple act of feeding a pup had already begun to shift the balance of something far larger than herself. The days that followed carried a quiet tension Elena's heart could not name, like the moment before a storm when the air pressed close to the skin without a single drop of rain. She noticed it first in the forest, in the way the birds went silent sooner at dusk and the wind shifted direction without warning, circling instead of passing through. Her path to Ash felt watched now, not with threat, but with focus, as if each step she took was being counted and remembered. The pup sensed it too. Ash no longer waited near the fallen log alone. It sat straighter, alert to sounds Elena could not hear, gaze lifting toward the trees at odd moments, ears flicking toward spaces that looked empty. Elena slowed her steps, keeping her movements calm, because instinct told her panic would only sharpen whatever attention had settled around them. She brought the food, smaller portions now because Ash needed less help, and set it down as usual, sitting back to wait. Ash ate, then did something new, circling once before settling at her side instead of across from her, not touching, but close enough that their shoulders nearly aligned. Elena held her breath and let it happen, accepting the change without reaching for it. The forest responded in subtle ways. The air grew warmer in pockets, then cooled again, and Elena felt the strange awareness return, stronger this time, as if the space behind her carried weight. She turned slowly and caught a glimpse of movement deeper among the trees, not fast, not fleeing, but deliberate. Her heart thudded once, then steadied. She did not call out. She did not retreat. She stayed exactly where she was, one hand resting on her knee, the other loose at her side, posture open because fear felt wrong here. The presence remained, distant but unmistakable, a quiet pressure that held without closing in. When she finally rose to leave, Ash stood with her, watching the same direction she did, body aligned as if sharing a single focus. Back at the settlement, the tension followed her. Conversations paused when she passed. A few wolves stood at the edge of the clearing longer than usual, noses lifting as if catching a scent they could not place. Someone muttered about the woods feeling restless. Another joked that maybe the old stories were waking up again, the ones elders told to keep pups close at night. Elena kept her eyes down and finished her tasks, but she felt the shift settling into the pack like a low hum beneath the surface. That evening, as she carried water back to her cabin, measured in gallons she had learned to lift without spilling, she saw tracks near the tree line, larger than any she recognized, pressed deep into the earth as if the ground itself had yielded. She stopped, stared, then stepped around them carefully, not wanting to disturb something that felt intentional. Night fell thicker than usual. The moon hung low, light diffused by thin cloud, turning the forest into layers of silver and shadow. Elena sat on her small porch longer than she normally would, listening, the quiet stretching without breaking. Far beyond her sight, for black wolves moved into position, not circling, not advancing, simply taking their places like sentinels. From higher ground, a man stood with his hands clasped behind his back, posture still, gaze fixed on the narrow strip of land Elena crossed each day. Alpha King Rowan Blackmore did not move as the night deepened. He watched the way the Omega paused before entering the woods, the way she waited instead of calling, the way the pup chose her side without command. He felt the response ripple outward, the forest acknowledging what the pack had ignored, and he understood then that the quiet escalation he had allowed was reaching its threshold. Elena did not know his name, did not know the weight of the attention she had earned, only that as she lay down to sleep, the air felt charged with something patient and vast, as if the world itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next small, decisive act. The night it happened arrived without announcement, slipping into place as if it had always been meant to stand apart from the others. Elena Hart followed her familiar path under a moon blurred by thin cloud. The forest washed in soft gray light that flattened distance and made every sound feel closer. Ash walked beside her now instead of waiting ahead, steps quiet, pace matched to hers with a precision that felt learned. Elena carried less food than before, just enough to honor the habit they had formed, and as she knelt near the clearing, she felt the air shift, not sharply, but with a measured certainty that made her spine straighten. Ash stopped moving. The pup lifted its head and looked past the trees, body still, ears forward, not fearful, but attentive. Elena followed the gaze and saw them. Four black wolves stood at the edge of the clearing where shadow met moonlight, spaced evenly, forms large and unmistakable, their dark coats absorbing the glow instead of reflecting it. They did not advance. They did not bare teeth or make a sound. They simply stood, watching, presence steady and controlled, as if the clearing were a place of quiet significance rather than conquest. Elena's breath caught once, then slowed. Every instinct told her to remain calm, to stay exactly where she was, because sudden movement would break something delicate she did not fully understand. She lowered the food to the ground with care and straightened, hands relaxed at her sides, posture open. Ash took a step forward, then stopped, glancing back at her as if asking permission before sitting at her heel. The wolves did not move closer, but their attention sharpened, for sets of eyes tracking the smallest shifts, the way Elena balanced her weight, the way she did not reach for the pup or retreat from the space she held. The forest felt fuller, layered with awareness, and Elena sensed rather than saw that this moment had been building for days. She swallowed and spoke softly, not to the wolves, but to Ash, a few calm words about the night air and the way the moon hid behind clouds, her voice steady enough to ground her own pulse. One of the wolves tilted its head, a subtle movement that mirrored Ash's earlier curiosity, and Elena felt a strange certainty settle in her chest, not safety exactly, but recognition. Somewhere beyond the clearing, unseen by her, a man stood in stillness, his presence anchored, his gaze focused not on the display of power before him, but on the Omega who refused to flinch. Alpha King Rowan Blackmore had allowed the escort to step into view because the time for watching from a distance had passed, and what he saw confirmed what instinct had already whispered. Elena did not beg. She did not challenge. She did not claim. She simply existed in the space she had earned through consistency, offering food without expectation and respect without fear. The wolves remained for long minutes, the night holding its breath, until one by one they stepped back, melting into shadow with the same deliberate control they had shown in arrival. The clearing exhaled. Elena realized she had been holding her breath and let it out slowly, heart steady, hands still. Ash looked up at her, eyes bright, tail still, and leaned lightly against her leg, a brief touch that carried weight far beyond its simplicity. Elena rested her palm against her own thigh and did not move away, accepting the contact as part of the quiet agreement they had formed. When she finally turned to leave, the forest felt altered, not louder or darker, but aligned, as if lines had been drawn and respected. Far above, Rowan Blackmore remained where he was, gaze following the Omega until she disappeared among the trees, his decision complete. The pack would soon notice what had changed, but Elena Hart walked back toward her small cabin unaware that her gentle routine had just crossed into legend, and that four black wolves had come not to threaten, but to witness. Morning arrived pale and unsettled, as if the forest itself had not fully decided to return to ordinary time. Elena Hart woke with the lingering sense of alignment still humming beneath her skin, the memory of four steady silhouettes at the edge of moonlight carried into daylight without fading. She moved through her routine carefully, noticing how the air felt clearer near the trees and heavier closer to the settlement, as though two different worlds were pressing against one another. Ash waited near her door now, sitting a few feet back, posture calm, eyes attentive, the simple fact of its presence already a quiet statement. Elena paused, then nodded once, and the pup rose to follow at her side. They walked the familiar path together, Elena aware of every footstep, every sound, not from fear, but from an odd certainty that nothing about this day would be entirely small. The forest greeted them with a deeper stillness than usual, birds quiet, light filtering down in clean shafts that illuminated dust and drifting pollen. Elena set the food down out of habit, though she knew Ash no longer needed it in the same way, and the pup ate briefly before sitting, gaze lifted, ears angled toward a ridge Elena could not see. She followed the line of attention and felt it again, that restrained presence holding just beyond sight, patient and unyielding. She did not speak this time. She simply waited. Far above, Alpha King Rowan Blackmore stood at the same vantage point he had chosen the night before, his stance relaxed, his attention unwavering. He did not step forward because stepping forward would change the nature of what he observed, and he was not finished observing. He watched the Omega who fed without excess, who waited without command, who allowed closeness without possession. He watched the pup respond not to dominance, but to consistency, and he noted how the forest adjusted around them, how paths seemed to open and sounds aligned. This was not chance. This was pattern. When Elena turned to leave, Ash followed one pace behind, stopping when she stopped, moving when she moved, and Rowan felt the echo of a bond forming where none should have existed, quiet and undeniable. At the settlement, the reaction was immediate. Heads turned, voices lowered. Someone pointed toward the woods and then away again, as if naming the direction alone carried weight. A few wolves gathered near the edge of the clearing, noses lifting, expressions uncertain. An elder frowned, sensing something that did not fit neatly into known rules. Elena felt the attention and kept her posture steady, shoulders relaxed, eyes forward. She did not hide Ash. She did not present it either. She moved as she always had, carrying water, measuring grain, completing tasks with the same calm care, and the contrast unsettled those who watched. By late afternoon, murmurs spread, not accusations yet, but questions. Why had the woods grown quiet? Why did the air feel heavier at night? Why had no one heard the usual calls beyond the treeline? Elena returned to her cabin before dusk, Ash settling near the threshold as if it belonged there, and for the first time she realized the pup carried a scent beneath the ordinary forest notes, something steady and old that set her instincts humming without alarm. Night fell, and from the ridge, Rowan Blackmore turned away at last, his decision refined by daylight. He would not intervene yet. Witnessing had been enough to confirm what mattered, and restraint would serve better than spectacle. Below, Elena Hart prepared for sleep, unaware that the pack had begun to recalibrate around her presence, or that the Alpha King had chosen patience over proclamation, allowing the truth of her actions to speak in the quiet spaces where power recognized its equal. The shift became unavoidable by the next evening, when the pack's unease condensed into decision and voices gathered where paths converged. Elena Hart sensed it before she heard it, the way the air tightened and footsteps aligned with purpose rather than habit. She was at the edge of the woods with Ash when the call went up, not sharp, not angry, but firm, a summons that carried expectation. Elena placed the remaining food down and straightened, Ash stepping close, shoulder brushing, her leg in a quiet echo of trust. When she turned toward the settlement, eyes followed from every direction, some curious, some wary, a few edged with irritation that could not quite find its footing. An elder spoke first, measured and careful, asking questions framed as concern, about strange scents, about quiet nights, about the wisdom of encouraging attachments that did not fit the pack's order. Elena listened without interrupting, hands relaxed, posture open, because she had learned that defensiveness invited conclusions she did not intend. Ash remained still, head high, gaze steady, not cowering, not challenging. A younger wolf scoffed, muttering about misplaced kindness and the risk of bringing trouble closer, and a ripple of agreement moved through the group like a low current. Elena stepped forward one pace and stopped, placing herself between Ash and the crowd without dramatics, without raised voice, simply occupying the space she believed was hers to hold. She said that the pup was fed, not owned, that it took what it needed and left the rest, that no harm had come from care given quietly and consistently. Her words were simple, unadorned, chosen for clarity rather than persuasion. The murmurs shifted. Someone pointed out that patterns mattered, that attention from the woods was not accidental, that 4 dark shapes had been seen and felt, and that consequences followed notice. Elena acknowledged the concern with a nod and said only that she would not abandon a living thing because it made others uncomfortable. The line landed without force and yet held. Ash pressed closer, a light contact that steadied both of them, and the forest answered with a subtle change, a hush that rolled inward rather than outward. From beyond the clearing came the awareness again, multiplied, layered, as if watchers had aligned their focus at once. The pack felt it. Backs straightened. Voices trailed off. No one advanced. The elder cleared his throat and suggested postponement, time to observe, to understand what the woods were signaling before decisions hardened into regret. Relief and frustration mingled, but the suggestion carried weight, and the gathering eased without resolution. As the group dispersed, Elena felt eyes linger, not accusing now, but measuring. She turned to leave and found Ash already moving with her, pace matched, stopping when she stopped. The path home felt shorter, the night air calmer, as if lines had been drawn and respected. From the ridge, Alpha King Rowan Blackmore watched the exchange unfold without stepping into it, noting the Omega's refusal to escalate, her choice to shield without spectacle, the way the pup mirrored her restraint. He noted the pack's hesitation when confronted not by threat, but by composure, and he allowed the moment to settle because moments like these shaped outcomes more reliably than declarations. Elena reached her cabin and paused at the threshold, resting her hand briefly against the doorframe as if grounding herself. Ash settled nearby, posture relaxed, watchful without tension. Somewhere in the forest, 4 black wolves shifted their positions and then stilled, the night aligning once more. Elena lay down to sleep with a steady heart, unaware that her quiet stand had been seen by those whose judgments carried farther than any voice in the clearing, and that the next step would belong not to argument, but to recognition. The night chose itself, gathering weight as clouds thinned and the moon sharpened into a pale coin above the trees. Elena Hart felt the pull before any call was made, a steady insistence that drew her back to the clearing with Ash at her side, the forest opening as if it recognized her steps. The pack arrived in loose formation, elders near the front, others hanging back, all quieter than usual, voices kept low by an awareness that pressed from every direction. Elena stood where moonlight pooled, posture calm, hands relaxed, and Ash sat close, gaze lifted, ears forward, neither hiding nor posturing. The air shifted, not abruptly, but decisively, and 4 black wolves stepped into view at the forest's edge, spaced evenly, coats drinking the light. The pack froze. No one spoke. The wolves did not advance. They waited. A breath passed, then another, and the space between moments stretched until the hush felt intentional. From beyond them, a man stepped forward into the silver wash, movement unhurried, presence unmistakable. Alpha King Rowan Blackmore did not raise his voice. He did not bear symbols or issue commands. He stood and the forest aligned around him, a quiet authority settling like gravity. The pack bowed as recognition rippled through them, spines bending with instinct rather than fear. Elena remained standing, not in defiance, but because no instinct told her otherwise, and Rowan noticed the distinction immediately. His gaze moved from the wolves to the Omega, measuring without judgment, and then to the pup whose scent carried echoes of old blood and careful care. He spoke at last, voice even, words chosen for clarity rather than spectacle, acknowledging the attention drawn to the woods, the restraint shown, the choice to observe rather than disrupt. He named the pattern the pack had felt but not understood, the way consistent kindness changed currents without forcing them. Elena listened, heart steady, recognizing the cadence of truth spoken plainly. Rowan's eyes returned to her and softened by a fraction, not with indulgence, but with respect. He said that what was fed with patience grew into balance, that what was protected without possession learned to stand. He did not ask why she had done it. He stated that she had. The wolves shifted subtly, aligning behind him, and Ash rose, stepping forward one pace before stopping. looking back at Elena as if confirming permission. She nodded once, a small movement that carried weight. Rowan inclined his head in return, an acknowledgement that crossed distance without diminishing either side. He explained that the pup would return to where it belonged when the time was right, not taken, not claimed, but guided, and that until then, protection would be given without condition. The pack exhaled as one, tension easing into understanding, murmurs dissolving into silence. Elena felt the forest settle, lines drawn and honored. Rowan did not linger. He turned with measured grace, the 4 black wolves moving as one, fading back into shadow. Ash paused, then followed a few steps, stopped, and returned to Elena's side, the agreement between them intact. The moon slid behind a thin veil of cloud, softening the clearing, and the pack slowly straightened, eyes no longer wary, but thoughtful. Elena walked home under a sky that felt newly aligned, unaware that in the quiet exchange of recognition, her place in the story had shifted from overlooked to seen, and that the Alpha King had chosen not to claim her in words, but to honor her in action. The days that followed unfolded with a gentler clarity, as if the forest had eased its shoulders and allowed ordinary time to return, though nothing was quite ordinary anymore. Elena's heart moved through her mornings with the same quiet care, but the path felt different beneath her feet, less like an edge and more like a threshold. Ash stayed close, attentive without clinging, presence light and steady, and Elena sensed the subtle preparation in the air, the way moments aligned toward an inevitable turning. When the time came, it did not arrive with ceremony. Rowan Blackmore returned alone at dawn, stepping into the clearing while mist still clung to the ground, his presence calm and unmistakable without needing announcement. Elena stood where she always did, posture open, heart steady, and Ash approached him without hesitation, tail still, eyes bright, recognition passing between them like a current. Rowan knelt, not in submission but in respect, resting a hand near the pup without touching, and spoke quietly of guidance rather than departure, of belonging without severance. Ash paused, glanced back at Elena, and she nodded, trusting the care she had witnessed rather than fearing the change she could not control. The pup stepped forward, then stopped, pressed its forehead briefly to Elena's knee in a small, grounding gesture that felt like gratitude rather than farewell. Elena breathed in slowly, letting the moment anchor itself, and watched as Ash moved to Rowan's side, the alignment natural and unforced. The forest responded with a hush that felt like approval. Rowan rose and met Elena's gaze, his expression composed, eyes clear. He thanked her plainly, not with titles or promises, but with acknowledgement that recognized the value of patience and choice. He told her that protection did not end with distance, that paths once aligned did not simply diverge, and that his watch would remain steady even when unseen. Elena accepted the words without bow or flourish, because what mattered had already been proven. As Rowan turned away, the clearing felt lighter, not emptied, and the mist began to lift, sunlight threading through branches. Back at the settlement, the shift settled into daily life. Eyes followed Elena with curiosity rather than dismissal. Conversations adjusted their tone. No one mocked the path she walked or the space she held. An elder offered a nod in passing, a simple gesture that carried weight. Elena continued her work, measuring water and grain, tending what needed tending, her movements unchanged, her presence now unquestioned. At night, the forest breathed evenly, and Elena slept without the hum of anticipation under her skin. Sometimes, as she stood at her threshold, she sensed a distant steadiness, not watching in scrutiny, but holding a line of regard that felt protective without being confining. She learned to recognize that strength could be gentle without losing authority, and that recognition did not require possession to endure. In the weeks that followed, the pack found its balance, guided by patterns that had revealed themselves without force. Elena remained who she had always been, an Omega who chose consistency over spectacle, kindness over control. And though her world did not crown her or change her name, it adjusted around her presence in quiet ways that mattered. Somewhere beyond the trees, Rowan Blackmore carried forward with renewed certainty, the memory of an Omega who fed without expectation and stood without fear, shaping his understanding of leadership. The story did not end with a claim spoken aloud or a bond declared under moonlight. It ended with alignment, with respect earned and returned, and with the knowledge that true strength had been witnessed and would not be forgotten.